It's okay. Let's all stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Daly,
here.
Vice President Headland,
Here.
Trustee Clements, here. Trustee McNall,
Here.
Trustee Parr.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome to our first meeting in the auditorium. We will now be meeting in the auditorium for the foreseeable. So if anybody at home would like to join us, this is where we are. You can enter through the main building entrance. Our next meeting will be September 15th at 7 o'clock right here. We will be doing a campus walkthrough at 6 p.m. Previous to that public meeting for the board. And I just want to welcome a couple of members of the school community leadership team while I have our attention. So some of these organizations do every year, some of it's every 2 years. So I'm just going to read the new presidents of our supporting organizations and welcome them and thank them for taking on the responsibility. So Laura O'Connell is the new president of the PTA. Michelle Cupper, the new president of the Haldane School Foundation. Mary Rose Donahue, the new president of the Blue Devils Booster Club. And Corey Reister is continuing as the president of the Haldane Arts Alliance. So a big thank you to those individuals and their respective committees and leadership teams. They're an important part of our school district, and we're happy to work with you this year. And that's it. I'll turn it over to Dr. Benante.
Thank you, Jen. And good evening to our board members and folks who may be joining from home. I just want to give a few updates related to our school reopening. Yesterday was our first day with all of our staff back on campus, and I thank Jen for joining us for some opening remarks with our faculty and staff yesterday via Zoom. Even though we were all on campus, we were doing it somewhat remotely to minimize any congregation on campus. So just another example of how school's back in session, but some of our routines and procedures are changing. As we continue to adapt to the pandemic. But I would say that we've had a very positive opening over the last 2 days. It's been great to see our staff again, and we look forward to the return of our students beginning on Thursday. One just other area that I wanted to note as we've been having a running dialogue, if I could reference some things I shared last meeting with regards to how we were going to support those who are learning remotely. And as a reminder, we have about 15 to 20% of our students who are learning remotely or who've chosen the all-remote option for this school year. We're paying particular attention to our youngest learners and how we can continue to support them in their learning. And as Ann had mentioned last meeting, we do have some fund balance that from last school year that we can commit towards our continued work in supporting our students for this school year. And through discussion with our leadership and also with some of our teachers who made themselves available in the closing months of summer, I am prepared at our next meeting to recommend the creation of 2 additional teaching positions specific to support those remote learners and our classroom teachers for grades K through 3. And what we would envision is that one of those individuals would support teachers and remote learners at the K-1 level, and then another would support remote learners and teachers who are working with our remote learners at the 2-3 level. These are not staff, and I'll speak more to it at our next meeting, but it's a heads up to the board just because it's something we've been working on. It's an ongoing development. I want to reiterate what I shared last time in that all of these students who are learning remotely are attached to classroom units, and will be for the for the school year, or for as long as we're in this situation. And we see this as just a further opportunity to support all of our classrooms at those levels, but paying particular attention, obviously, to the developmental needs of our youngest learners, and we're given the funding that we have available to do so. So we see that as our best means of support. So if I'm a remote learner in first grade, as an example, I'll still be attached, and I'll just use Mrs. Hawker as an example, to Mrs. Hawker's class, and I can expect to be interacting with the classroom at various points throughout the day. But we do think that it would be of great benefit to all of our students to have someone who also can provide supplemental support to those students throughout the day as well. Now, Ms. Hawker may choose to do that on certain days, or our new educator may choose to do so on certain days. So we see it as like a co-taught type environment, no different than we have in certain settings throughout the course of throughout our school district. So that's just one new development that we're continuing to give attention to. As I said to the board, and as I said to the community, we're going to be planning all the way up until the start of school, and potentially even through the start of school, and continue to adapt based on what we see. But just as a segue or a bridge between what Ann shared last meeting about some fund balance, our continued planning, and we feel that's a good way to direct some of those funds as we enter into the start of the school year. But it will take some time to get set up. So our classroom teachers are aware of this. We've been working with them over the last 2 days, obviously, but we would like to begin to move forward in identifying 2 additional educators to come on and support us in this way for the foreseeable future. And as I mentioned last meeting, there's a couple of scenarios that could play out over the course of the school year. And one of those scenarios that I would hope would occur is that we'll all be back in school at some point. And if that's the case, I still see these individuals very much in a position to act as interventionists, to continue to provide support to our students. We anticipate identifying a certain level of need as our students come back onto campus in the coming weeks. And we see these as 2 supplemental support members who will be able to continue to help us providing support to whatever we may encounter over the course of this school year as we begin to hopefully enter into a post-COVID environment later on this school year. So there'll be more on that at our next meeting, but I wanted to give you a sense of what direction this was heading in anticipation of having a recommendation to you 2 weeks from now. Just moving on, one other update. With respect to athletics, Governor Cuomo had announced it seems like a couple of weeks ago, although my sense of time is not the best over the last few weeks, but the prospect of, or his endorsement of athletics beginning September 21st. Robert Zayas, who's the executive director of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, reiterated that. And just for folks who may not be aware, Section 1 is the governing body. It's a subgroup of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. We're part of Section 1, which is us in schools in our region. We'll make the final determination on an official start date with respect to sports by the end of this week. So even though at the state level, a September 21st date has been out there for some time and now has been endorsed, the section could modify that start date. And I know Section 1 officials have solicited feedback from superintendents, from athletic directors over the course of the last 2 weeks in anticipation of this, and I do expect the section to have some information to share with us by the end of this week, and at that time we'll share that with our school community. Local school districts also have the discretion as to whether or not to participate. So the section could establish a start date, but an individual school district could say, we're not going to participate in athletics. Just in full candor and transparency, I've provided feedback to our section officials, and I have shared that I feel that Haldane would be in a position to begin athletics whether it be at September 21st or what other date is defined as the start date for or by Section 1. However, I do realize that my colleagues are in a unique position depending on where they may be with the prospect of reopening their school. And we're a part of a larger section, and Haldane will be ready, and I feel confident we could be ready to begin interscholastic competition. I feel it's important to our student athletes, no different than other extracurriculars or activities in school itself, and offering an opportunity for our kids to re-engage with one another and reconnect with our staff. My hope is that other schools also have the opportunity and the time that they need to begin athletics. And obviously it doesn't matter if we're alone in this, if there's no other schools to compete against, and then there's no point to athletics. So I know our superintendents in the region have been working very hard with their athletic directors to try to anticipate the potential start to an athletic season for our student athletes this fall. And again, I look forward to sharing whatever final decisions made by the end of this week. That being said, I will put a message out to our community tomorrow just to give them a sense of the timeline and some of the factors that are being considered in this decision, as it's one I'm beginning to get questions on. And I think in the meantime, families should get an update from the school, so I'll provide that.
Can I just ask you a question about that? So you said that if we don't compete, if there isn't interscholastic inter-school competition, then we probably wouldn't run our sports. But is there an opportunity to still have our teams start and practice and, keep their skills building without the competition piece?
There likely would be. I would just want to discuss that with the board before making that decision to do so. And we're not there yet. So I think after this week, we'll know where we stand in relation to other schools as well. And we'll be in a better position to talk through what options we have this fall. Something to consider, and it has to always be in the back of our mind, is the potential for a COVID-related closure. And I just want the board to be aware that if we were to start athletics, the governor in his orders have indicated that if a school is closed currently because it's in an all-remote environment, which many school districts in our region are, they're not starting till October, athletic practices and competitions still may begin. However, if a school is closed because of a COVID-related incident or closure, meaning there's someone with a confirmed case, and maybe it was the decision of the superintendent to close the school in consultation with the district physician and Department of Health, after school activities, including athletics, may not occur. Just my worry, and it's not ultimately influencing my decision to say we can compete or not, is just that we get into a part of the fall, we have to close our schools because of a COVID-related closure, and now our kids cannot compete, and the athletic season is occurring. So that would put us in a position where we have to cancel competition for a period of time, or until such period of time that we were back in session. And this is a variable that I know other schools have brought forward as a point of concern. And one of the options that was out there for being discussed was a delay of all athletics until January. And I know part of the thought process behind that was, well, would we be in a better place to ensure consistent competition, albeit for a shorter period of time, because you're shortening each of your seasons if you wait until January to start, and potentially avoid an interruption to season because of a COVID-related closure. We're trying to predict the future at that point, and I think if we could think back 6 months ago, we never thought we'd be here in this particular way. I thought we thought we'd be beyond it, but I understand the sentiment. But that is an important distinction I would want our community to be aware of, especially if we're in athletic competition, that if we have to close schools for a period of time, our kids can't compete. And that is embedded in the governor's order allowing for competition. There has some contingencies attached to it, and that's one of the contingencies. So I just want to make sure we're going into this eyes wide open, given what information we may get at the end of the week.
Just a quick clarifying question on the as of now, we can start on the 21st in
Correct.
Section 1. Is that all sports, or is it a limited group of sports?
So it's all fall sports with the exception of volleyball and football. And volleyball, I think the thought process behind that is it's an indoor sport. Okay. And football is considered, no, it's funny, football is being put in a different category because it's a high contact sport. But if you've watched, a high school soccer game, there's just as much, I wouldn't say there's just as much contact. The nature of the sport is a little different, but there's plenty of physical contact in a lot of our sports, but it's not being put in the same category. There could be some changes to that between now and the end of the week, but we'll see how that plays out. But John, that's a good question. So volleyball and football are currently in a different category where practices may resume, but competition currently may not.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you.
And you said if we're remote, we can still participate in competition. But if we're remote, how are they going to practice for the competition?
So we still have the ability, even if we're in a remote environment, and let's assume it's not related to a COVID-related matter occurring on campus, to have student athletes come back onto campus and practice in the afternoon. So you can imagine my colleagues who are in districts that are not starting till October, which many, again, in our district or in our region have made that decision not to start having students come back onto campus until October. October 5th is a common date, who are now faced with potentially bringing students back onto campus for practice on September 21st. And, there are concerns about that. And so that's the feedback I believe our section is considering right now, out of a level of awareness that many schools in our region are not bringing students back until the first week of October and potentially shifting that September 21st start date to a later date. And the section will determine that. So I would not be surprised if we see a delay beyond September 21st to, a couple of weeks after that because of what's going on in many other districts in our region.
Right. It just doesn't seem consistent that, you can't come to class, but you can come and play sports.
Correct.
But some of the reasons that they're not coming to class is for staffing reasons and
Right.
things like that.
Correct.
It's not necessarily
Right.
safety reasons.
Well, none of this is consistent.
Yeah.
Since March, we've had.
And that's so you're pointing to some things, Margaret, where there's been a lot of inconsistency,
Yeah.
and that's this is just another example of some inconsistency that's out there. The governor's expressed concerns about schools reopening, but yet, he's given the green light on athletics, and so that's we've been living that for
Right.
6 months now, so no surprise to
Right.
our board. But again, I expect to have a lot more information certainly by the time we meet. But you're likely to see me putting out things to families because it's timely as soon as we hear from the section.
Thank you.
Yeah. And as you know, Mr. Salem's last day with us was yesterday, and we bid farewell to Chris. And Mr. Goddard's first day was today. I must admit, I don't think Mr. Salem, myself, or Mr. Goddard thought we would be in a position to begin athletics in September. That being said, we think we're in a position to go ahead because of the preparations that have been going on here for the last couple of months to get things in place. But it's coming up quick, so we'll be pretty busy these next few weeks, making sure that we review whatever standards for practice and competition are in place, and making sure that our practices here are consistent with whatever those standards and guidelines are. So just one other update there in terms of athletics. So that's all I have related to school reopening for now. Again, we very much look forward to Thursday, to having our kids on campus. Just one other note, again, as Ann had mentioned back at our last meeting, through the state office, we have the Division of Budget has indicated that there is going to be 20% of our state aid withheld for the time being. And I wanted to share with the school board a letter from many area state senators, and this is included in your packet that was sent to United States representatives and senators regarding the potential impact of that on our school systems and school systems throughout our region. And while these funds are currently being withheld at this time, and we're hopeful those funds will be restored in full throughout this school year, I wanted to make you aware of the advocacy efforts of many of the state senators in our region. Because as has been a part of this conversation really since March or April, a potential federal aid package is really essential to the functioning of our state and our school funding that we receive from the state. And I just wanted the board to remain attuned to what may be going on at a state level, in particular in the area of advocacy, because that's an important topic for us and certainly for our long-term success here. While in the short term we're okay, in the long term it's important for us to receive our state funding. And while we're not as dependent as some other districts on state aid, we put those dollars to good use here. And it would have a big impact on the way we operate our school system. And we're hopeful, obviously, over time that this is made whole. And again, just wanted to make you aware of this advocacy letter from some of our state senators.
Thank you. Okay, is there any communication from the public? No? We do, for our viewers at home, we do have our chairs in here spaced out in case you can't see them. And I believe there's a 50-person gathering limit at the moment, so unless we get a storming of an audience, we should be good in here. Okay, the information reports are here for review, and we're going into consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
These are the minutes from our August 22nd business meeting. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Dr. Benante, do you have anything you'd like to share about all of these items?
If I may, and I hope I'm not too long-winded. First, a congratulations to Ms. Llewellyn and Mr. Smith for their conferral of tenure. I just wanted to congratulate both Carolyn and Lex. We're proud to have them as part of our school community. And then, as I mentioned during our last meeting, we could anticipate having to resolve the potential for some leave requests that would be brought before the board as other districts were deciding to close or remain closed to students through October or through September. It created some situations where some of our staff had to take leave of absences to care for their own families. So you will see some of those here. And I'd like to just extend my appreciation for Ms. Jamin in particular, who's been working diligently to make sure that we have highly qualified long-term substitutes filling these positions. And I know it's relatively late notice to our families. This has been the nature of kind of how some things have evolved over these last 6 months. And I know Christine notified families yesterday and was deliberate in making sure that when she was notifying families of a potential leave, that she wanted to make sure she was also communicating to the extent that she could the substitute who would be in the class for that period of time, and she was able to do so. So Christine was hard at work interviewing candidates all through last week, and we're really benefiting just from the way things are right now from having some really quality individuals who are able to come in and help us over the next 8 to 12 weeks. And we're pleased with that. So some of whom were on campus with us today, participating with our teachers in their workshops as we get ready for the start of the school year. So you'll see a number of leave requests. You'll also see a number of recommendations for the appointment of substitutes or long-term subs for those leave requests here. In addition to that, we have some other appointments that we've made for teacher aides to provide additional support in specific areas as we open up the school year on Thursday with kids.
Great, lots of new faces. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Aye. So we're going into new business here. Annually, we talk about our designation of Board of Education members to district committees. We did go through and designate Sean and John as our audit committee members during our reorganization meeting. And we're going to take a few moments now to divvy up the remaining, to beg, borrow, and steal, for the remaining committees. Okay, and John has been kind enough to record it in Megan's Google Doc for us here. So on this here, it says that, Sean, are you continuing on the Buildings and Grounds Committee? Was that something you'd wanted to do, or did somebody just put your name across the board for you?
It was an open doc at one point, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll continue
Oh,
doing that.
you implemented. Oh, okay. You
And
went
I just
into
sort
the
of put
board
my
doc.
name in there thinking, well, that seems reasonable. I should try
Would you like to continue in that? Fantastic.
Sure, that'd be great.
Great. Okay, so maybe if anybody just has any thoughts, I mean, for me, I think Peggy and I would like to continue on the policy
Correct.
committee.
I'm also happy to continue on the technology committee. It is difficult for me to attend those meetings because they're during the workday and I don't get to as many as I would like. But, so saying that, I definitely always follow those committee meeting notes very carefully, and I'm certainly available to the committee if they want. But if somebody else really thought that they could be there at 3:15 and,
I think that's just the state of the board. It's like, we go when we can go.
But I'm also happy to continue.
Yeah, okay. Is there anybody else who would really like to be on the technology committee? Like to lobby for that?
Technology with you or instead of you. I would try something new this year.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like it's my last year. I might as well try something new. Mm-hmm. So I could do technology if you wanted to give that up.
No, I don't actually. Of all the committees, it's a committee that I feel is the best fit for me.
Oh. Yeah, good. Okay, so Peggy wants to continue on the technology committee. So Margaret, you have to find
I had to pick something else. for something
another branching off item.
I'll swap you a code of conduct for safety team.
new. Okay,
Oh,
All right,
there we go.
cool.
I can do that.
I've never been on the wellness committee, so I'd like to be on the wellness committee. And
You've never
do
been
we
on
always have
wellness?
2 people on the wellness committee? That's probably some sort of mandate, I guess. Labor management's a really easy one because we have a fantastic teachers union, and so I'm happy to continue on that one. I'm happy to say we never had to meet this past year.
I could stay on that too.
So it looks like we just need somebody for health and safety.
And I'm happy to do that.
You want to continue?
Sure. All right,
Okay.
so audit, Sean and John. Buildings and Grounds, Sean. Code of Conduct, John. District-wide safety team, Margaret. Health and safety, John. Technology, Peggy. Wellness, Jen. Policy.
Wait, I'm sorry. Do we need 2 people for wellness? We had 2 people.
I'm happy to do that.
You wanna jump on there?
Great. Jen and Sean. Policy, Peggy and Jen. Labor management, Jen and Margaret.
Okay.
So the one thing I want to point out is we haven't enacted the new policy manual yet, but there is a mandated visitation committee that we could go ahead and implement. And the reason why we haven't had a visitation committee, and we're thinking about not having a visitation committee, is that the entire board always visits the school grounds, but we probably should establish a visitation committee. And I think it's a little bit different than just the buildings and grounds tour that we do.
It's like visiting classrooms in action.
It can be that. I mean, one of the things I was thinking, right, so one thing to think about with our committees is there's never going to be more than 2 of us on a committee like that, just because otherwise there's
Quorum.
Yeah, the quorum issue. But, you could imagine that they could visit classrooms. You could imagine that they, who's ever on that committee could plan to either follow up with a building, like after they've done their presentation to the board during the year. I don't know. I mean, one of the things I think for us to figure out is what that visitation committee would be. But it is a board committee. It's not. It's not necessarily a committee that needs to be made up of other people. I don't think.
Well, I think it's probably appropriate for us to figure out what the committee is. First.
All right.
But thank you for remembering that is on our agenda.
It is.
Yes. And then we can always just designate people,
Yeah, that's a good point.
whenever
Yes,
it's
that's actually a really good point.
established.
Yep.
So we can just do that throughout the year whenever we're ready. But thank you for bringing that up. And John, maybe if you could just add that on the list, and we'll just keep it empty so we know we have to deal with it.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay. So now we need to officially designate these assignments. So I would like to make a motion to designate the Board of Education members to the district committees for 2020 to 2021. May I have a motion, please? Oh, wait, I made a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Catherine, did you get that? Do you need us to read those again? You got it. Yeah.
Do you want to read them?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, done. Our Board of Education goals, 2020 to 2021. So this is a discussion. This isn't something we're setting in stone necessarily this evening, but we would like to, we have a goal of getting them officially approved by the October 1st, is that the right date? The first meeting in October, whenever that is, business meeting. So this is our discussion. We spoke about it a little bit at our retreat. I would like to remind us of what our goals were last year, which were to do our policy manual audit and to do our self-evaluation tool. And I believe we've made progress on both of those items. Just based on what our conversation was at the retreat, we discussed continuing with some of our goals, right? So that we discussed maybe continuing with the policy manual audit goal because it's still very much an in-motion goal that got a little sidelined with the COVID situation. We also talked about maybe wanting to put a goal on there that was about supporting the school through the COVID crisis. And the reopening process. We didn't discuss this at the retreat, but I'm going to bring it up that, we did just create and adopt a new strategic coherence plan. So often a goal of the board would be to support the implementation of such a plan. But also we have all these really great things to work on from our self-evaluation tool. So, I think it's good practice to have maybe 2 or 3 goals. We don't need to do everything. This is a big year. So maybe, John, if you just want to remind us of some items that we talked about during our self-evaluation tool to jog the memory.
Absolutely. So it's nice that this, at least partially accomplishing, I think actually fully accomplishing the goal from last year, we come up with new goals for this year. So there you go. So out of the self-evaluation, one of the 2 main things that I think came to the top were, one, the conversation about communication. And if I think I'm going to try to recap the conversation, is we got to a good place about feeling comfortable about not making a goal to establish new communication structures or methods, but that making sure that we're doing a better job of sharing in and kind of linking and labeling the communication that does go out from the district as coming both from the district and supported by the Board of Ed. That's, if I had to kind of put a button on it, that's I think where we got to. Is that My memory serve?
Yes.
Okay, all right. The other one, which I think is more interesting and there's potentially more meat on the bones, is how do we, as a board, how do we use and work with the district to understand data in support of the activities that we are doing and supporting the district in driving educational outcomes for the students across the district. And I think Peggy, you brought up a couple of good examples, and I think we ended up with at least potentially 4 things or tactics coming out of that potential goal. The goal, potential goal being work to drive more data-informed strategy or knowledge among the board and by transitive property among the members of the public. So I think the 4 things are, and again, correct me if my memory doesn't serve, one being proactive in continuing to ask data-based questions constantly during reports by administrators, faculty members, teachers about whatever the topic is at hand. So we need to lean in on that a little bit. Second was, can we work with the district over the course of the year to understand what would be an appropriate, I'm going to use the term loosely, scorecard that we could establish as like an ongoing structure to understand how our students are progressing. We get a lot of really good, rich reports on state tests, AP, student performance as athletes, and all those sorts of things. But they, at least I'll say personally, come as sort of points in time rather than being able to establish and understand where were we last year, where were we next year, where do we want to go. So that was kind of 2. 3 was with curriculum reports by the school leaders to make sure that when we have a curriculum report, we're also referring back to any new curricula that we recommended and therefore voted on establishing. Because usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, the process that goes through is the district identifies a need, assesses a new curriculum to be adopted, brings it before the board, usually runs a pilot and says, or some sort of test and says this is a good idea, and the board approves it. And so it would be great to be able to say, okay, has this done what you wanted it to do over time? So incorporate that kind of solution or outcome or reporting into a curricular review. I think that was actually only 3, so I can't come to number 4. Oh, the 4th one with Miss Sniffen sitting in the audience, and she's going to love to hear this, was the potential for postgraduate interactions. We had, at some point, we had talked about surveys, but I think the recommendation by Dr. Benante, which was a good one, was, is there a way to bring back representative students from different categories, whether it's what they're doing postgraduate, is it a 4-year college, is it a community college, is it work, are they near, are they far, whatever those characters, and basically have an informal conversation to say, did Haldane prepare you for what you're doing now? And use that as fodder for sort of ongoing improvement. Those are the 4 things I came up with. So that would be a bucket with 4 tactics underneath it, I think.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, how are you guys feeling about how to structure goals? I mean, in a way, I almost feel like tackling like one of those things, one of those 4 might be appropriate. I think that if we didn't have any of the other goals, we could just make that the goal for the year and kind of do the 3 or 4 bullet points within it. But I just don't think that's our situation, right?
I think this year it's going to be so hard to take on all of those.
Agreed, right? So maybe if we could, and also, I mean, I'm just saying that we talked about continuing with those other goals, but we haven't necessarily agreed with that or not. So those other 3 goals of policy manual audit, supporting the district with the COVID crisis, supporting the district with the strategic plan implementation, even if we just had those 3, that's a lot, right? So we could even say that that's it, that's what we're going to do this year, right? And the assessment weights. Or we could say that those aren't needs to be goals for the board, right? They're district goals. The district is If you look at Dr. Benante's goals, I'm sure that in there is the strategic plan and the COVID crisis, right? So do they really need to be board goals? Or are they district goals that we inherently support? And we could make our board goals the policy manual audit and one of the assessment tools, right? So that we give ourselves 2 specific goals. However, we're still supporting the district goals in the other arenas. So just different ways to think about it.
One thing about the data issue is I think it's part of the strategic coherence plan to actually to become a more data-driven district. And so it could be, because one of the things I was thinking as John was talking about the board's commitment to developing a better understanding about how to work with the district to use data to assess the performance of the district. At one point I thought, well, rather than sort of laying out these specific tasks that I think we all identified and discussed as being things that we found potentially beneficial things for us to do, for this year it could be part of our goal. What I had been thinking is one point was rather than having something specific, it would be to work with the district to understand, how to become a more data-driven district. But rather than having that as a separate goal, it actually could, for this year, could be
Part of the
consumed or subsumed or part of our process to support the district with with rolling out and thinking about implementing the strategic coherence plan. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. It's just a thought.
Yeah, and I'm also looking, as I look at these 4 items, the database questioning, the scorecard, the curriculum reports, the postgraduate interactions. The scorecard and the postgraduate interactions are actually going to create to-do lists for our administration, right? They're not something that we're actually going to implement. We might benefit from them and be a part of the process in developing them, but they would really, I imagine, be another thing for the administration to do.
And we don't want to give
And
them
we
too
don't
many
wanna
more
do that.
things to do
But
this year.
Exactly. But doing things like, if I look at this curriculum reporting, new implementation, I do feel like that's something that the board could drive, right? We talked about how do we follow up and ask for workshop topics on specific things, make sure that we're asking for follow-up on things that have been implemented. That is something that I feel like would be something that we could drive a bit in terms of organizing the workshop topics, asking for certain things from the administrators to report on, because they're going to do that anyway. So I just want to be wary of not giving the administration anything else on their plate.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I think we should avoid adding extra things to their plate because they have no idea what this year is going to look like. Mm-hmm. So the expectations for anything beyond getting through this, I don't want us to say, oh, we failed, because they have other things to do. I mean, the goal right now is to get these kids back in school, safe and healthy. The ones that can't come back, to get them integrated into the class with the remote learning, like as much as we can do to make this as normal as possible, that's going to be their big drive right now. So I don't think we should create any goals that create any more work for them than to do what that needs to be done for our kids and our staff.
Yeah. What we could also do, it's kind of unorthodox, but could we have like a mid-year, we do like a mid-year check-in, right?
Yeah,
At
that's a
that
good idea.
point, could we reevaluate and add or shift our goals? Mm-hmm. Could we say that the first half of the school year, when we reevaluate is somewhere in January or February, could we say that the first half of the school year is really just about supporting the district during the crisis, supporting the administration, getting the policy manual can still be in motion, but saving the database assessment work until the second half of the year if we do think that it's appropriate to re-examine what our goals are. It might not be appropriate. We might still be in crisis mode. Right. But if we're coming out of crisis mode, that might be an appropriate time to do that.
Right, it might be exactly the right
I
time.
think, like,
I don't know, what do you think?
as much as I would want to start work on a scorecard, I think that, like, you're coming to a capacity issue, right? Is there capacity for us to work with the administration of the district on figuring out what that would be? And frankly, for them to do the majority of the work, because we're not the skilled educators on understanding, like, progress. As much as I'd like to start that, totally get it. I think that with supporting through COVID and supporting through a strategic plan, we're kind of going to do. There's no way that's not going to happen. It's not going to be a goal. So I think we're going to be there anyway. If we're going to assess mid-year, then maybe what we do is we say for the first half of the year, as we lock down a new member onboarding process, and we take 6 months and get that out of the way, and that's really falls to us. So it's not an incremental administrative task. And then January or whenever we say, okay, we've done some policy work, we've done a new board manual that's sort of administration of the board. Is there capacity, where are we in district capacity to think about working with us on data and how we think about, or how we think about how our children progress and learn?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable that, and I thank you for remembering about the new board member orientation or onboarding.
Yep.
We've talked about that before. It's something that is important to us, and I think it's good timing because, you know, that it's possible that we would have we're not going to have a new board member this year, so it's perfect
That's
timing
the right time to do it. Yeah.
to look at it. So, you know, like I said, this isn't about making a decision tonight, but maybe if we want to just think about coming up with sort of a two-tiered, at mid-year being comfortable evaluating what our goals are.
That's a good idea.
And if we hunker down in the first part of the year is really making sure that our goals are supportive of the district and our board-specific work. So that we're not asking the district to do anything in addition. And then reevaluating at our mid-year and just seeing where we're at. So, okay. So why don't we wrap that for the moment, and then at our next meeting, maybe I'll put a draft together of those.
Sure.
And then if we can keep talking about them, so if anybody has more thoughts or suggestions, we can go from there. Thank you for listening to that. Did you like not having to jump into that conversation?
It's nice
Dr.
just to
Benante?
listen
Just to
sometimes. Absolutely.
Okay, well, your listening's over. Now you need to talk to
Yeah, we
us
need to talk
about your
the
district goals.
So, included in your packet, and I'm referring to the documents that were with the gold paperclip, are a draft of district goals for this year. I'm sorry, I did not use the term draft, but it should be there. So these are for your review. Typically, the creation of district goals mirrors the board creation process. So we look to have these finalized by October. So I just wanted to put them in front of you one more time this evening, and I'm sure we'll keep these on for our next board meeting as well. I would just ask that the board be prepared at our next meeting that if there are any recommended changes, that we'd have the opportunity to discuss those at our next meeting to leave me time to put as final a draft as possible in front of you in that first meeting in October, because that's really when we would look to communicate both the board goals and the district goals to the community at that point. As far as areas of focus, the first, to come as no surprise, continuing to facilitate instruction through the COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, that's I think somewhat self-explanatory. This is an important year for us, and I'm moving on to the second goal, to build an understanding of the district coherence, strategic coherence plan. The action steps that were created for the first 6 to 12 months within the coherence planning process have been articulated. One of those really centers around making sure that our supporting organizations, that our community at large is familiar with where we are trying to go as a school system. So the second goal speaks to that. The third goal was requested by the board as part of my evaluation last year as a continued area of focus, and I think we realized that it's a big goal. It's going to take multiple years, similar to the policy manual audit, right? There's some projects that extend far beyond what can be accomplished in 1 year's time. So I've had that goal here, I believe, for the third year now, continuing to have an orientation around our K-12 program and the processes that are related to its creation, its development, its implementation, and its review. So the third goal speaks to that. So three broad areas here that I'm developing goals around for your review, consideration, and discussion at our next meeting.
Great.
Can I make it?
Yeah, please, if there's any thoughts now.
We've certainly all heard a ton about what's going on to facilitate the continuity of instruction during
Yes.
the COVID crisis. So I think everybody's got the details on everything that needs to happen is going on now. It will be helpful for me to review, and I will take it upon myself to go back and review the strategic coherence plan. And also, it's probably even more in my distant memory of the curricular process and review. What would be great, if this is okay, when we vote on these next time, is just to, like, what are the big buckets of action steps? I'll go. I know they're written out in the strategic coherence plan, so I'll refresh my, like, what do you expect to accomplish tactically over the course of the year? Or what would you like to accomplish?
That's in there, and isn't it, it's part of the plan in there?
It is.
We-
It's at the back end of the plan. The first 6 to 12 month
Yep.
action steps are listed there. So that's there for review. Certainly, it's no issue for me to include them in this. I do think that there are some thoughts in the short term related to continuity of instruction as well, in terms of our initial assessment of how it's going this school year, early on in the process with staff and with kids. And there's a few other thoughts I have related to that as far as action steps that I could articulate. And then there's an interesting intersection, which we didn't have time to speak to at the retreat, between our curricular review and our long-term goals for our coherence plan. And some things that we were beginning to put in place this summer, ultimately decided to pause in our work with the teachers, again, out of respect for their preparation for this school year. But we did move forward with our administrators that I would like to share with the board as probably in more detail than just a few action steps. It could be related to the goal process, just to say, hey, here's the avenue we're thinking of taking to examine the intersection of our long-term goals for our kids and our curriculum work this year and in the years to come that I think the board would be interested in hearing about. So I may elaborate in a little more detail than action steps related to that, because I think it's good for the board to be aware of it, and also to provide us with feedback on how it resonates with you.
Great.
Okay, so more to come with those. So we're going into the approval of a resolution, and I will turn it over to Ms. Platt to read.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the terms of the release and settlement agreement involving student number 161711, a copy of which shall be incorporated by reference in the minutes of this meeting, and be it resolved that the Superintendent of Schools be and hereby is authorized to execute such release and settlement agreement on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, is there any communication from the public at this point? Okay, going into board reflections. Anybody have anything they'd like to share?
So my daughter this morning sent me a picture of her first day of kindergarten with my son, and it was his first day of first grade. And then she sent me a picture of her last first day because she's a senior in college this year. So I just thought that was kind of apropos for like the people that were calling me going, my kid has Mrs. Wild. It just seemed like it was completely full circle. So for all those parents that are sending their kids into kindergarten, you know, good luck to you. This is going to be a tough year, but she has made it through. She is at the end, and there are kids that went K-12 here that are finishing the same way your kids are starting kindergarten. So it was very sweet.
Nice. Dr. Benante, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
No further thoughts. Just welcome back. It's the second unofficial start to the school year. You know, July 1 marks the start of the school year with our board reorganization, but having students back on campus certainly carries a different feel to it. So we're looking forward to Thursday. Thanks.
Great. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cecilia.